Periods of American literature. 1607 to 1776, Colonial period. 1765 to 1790, the Revolutionary Age. 1775 to 1828, the Early National period. 1828 to 1865, the Romantic period, also known as the American Renaissance or the Age of Transcendentalism. 1865 to 1900, the Realistic period. 1900 to 1914, the Naturalistic period. 1914 to 1939, American Modernist period. 1920s, Jazz Age, Harlem Renaissance. 1920s, 1930s, the Lost Generation. 1939 present, the Contemporary period. 1950s, Beat writers. 1960s, 1970s, counterculture. In addition, American literature recognizes works of African American writers, Native American writers, Asian American writers. The colonial period of American literature spans the time between the founding of the first settlement at Jamestown to the outbreak of the Revolution. The writings of this time centered on religious, practical, or historical themes. The most influential writers of the colonial period include John Winthrop, Cotton Mather, Benjamin Franklin, and Anne Bradstreet. During the Revolutionary Age, 1765 to 1790, some of the greatest documents of American history were authored. In 1776, Thomas Paine authored Common Sense and Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. In 1781, the Articles of Confederation were ratified. Between 1787 and 1788, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay wrote the Federalist Papers. Finally, in 1787, the Constitution of the United States was drafted and in 1789 it was ratified. The early national period of American literature saw the beginnings of literature that could be truly identified as American. The writers of this new American literature wrote in the English style, but the settings, themes, and characters were authentically American. In addition, poets of this time wrote poetry that was relatively independent of English precursors. Three of the most recognized writers of this time are Washington Irving, James Fenimore Cooper, and Edgar Allan Poe. The period 1828 to 1865 in American literature is commonly identified as the Romantic period in America, but may also be referred to as the American Renaissance or the Age of Transcendentalism. The writers of this period produced works of originality and excellence that helped shape the ideas, ideals, and literary aims of many American writers. Writers of the American Romantic period include Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Edgar Allan Poe, Herman Melville, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Emily Dickinson, and Walt Whitman. Following the Civil War, American literature entered into the realistic period. The major form of literature produced in this era was realistic fiction. Unlike romantic fiction, realistic fiction aims to represent life as it really is and make the reader believe that the characters actually might exist and the situations might actually happen. In order to have this effect on the reader, realistic fiction focuses on the ordinary and commonplace. The major writers of the realistic period include Mark Twain, Henry James, Bret Harte, and Kate Chopin. The years 1900 to 1914 mark American literature's naturalistic period. Naturalism claims to give an even more accurate depiction of life than realism. In accordance with a post-Darwinian thesis, naturalistic writers hold that the characters of their works are merely higher-order animals whose character and behavior is entirely based upon heredity and environment. Naturalistic writings try to present subjects with scientific objectivity. These writings are often frank, crude, and tragic. Stephen Crane, Jack London, and Theodore Dreiser are the most studied American naturalists. Between 1914 and 1939, American literature entered into a phase which is still referred to as the beginnings of modern literature. Like their British counterparts, the American modernists experimented with subject matter, form, and style and produced achievements in all literary genres. Some well-known American modernist poets include Robert Frost, William Carlos Williams, Edna St. Vincent Millay, and E. E. Cummings. Included among American modernist prose writers are Edith Wharton, Sinclair Lewis, and Willa Cather. The American modernist period also produced many other writers that are considered to be writers of modernist period subclasses. For example, F. Scott Fitzgerald is considered a writer of the Jazz Age, Langston Hughes and W. E. B. Du Bois writers of the Harlem Renaissance, and Gertrude Stein, T. S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, and Ernest Hemingway writers of the Lost Generation. The Great Depression marked the end of the American modernist period, and writers such as William Faulkner, John Steinbeck, and Eugene O'Neill dealt with the social and political issues of the time in their literary works. 1939 marked the beginning of the contemporary period of American literature. This period includes an abundance of important American literary figures spanning from World War II into the new millennium. These writers include but are not limited to, Eudora Welty, John Updike, Kurt Vonnegut, Sylvia Plath, Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams, Ralph Ellison, Gwendolyn Brooks, Zora Neale Hurston, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, and Maya Angelou. During the 1950s, a vigorous anti-establishment, and anti-traditional literary movement emerged. The main writers of this movement, Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, are called beat writers. Much writing of the 1960s and 1970s, referred to as counterculture writing, continued the literary ideals of the beat movement, but in a more extreme and fevered manner. Currently, the contemporary American literary scene is crowded and varied. With the passage of time, the contemporary period may be reorganized and/or expanded. In the future, will writers such as Anne Rice, John Grisham, or Amy Tan be included in the canon of American literature? We will just have to wait and see. Thank